So this one is called the human condition. In about 20 minutes I'm going to try and run through that. It'll probably be not like anything else you've heard before, I wouldn't think. And it calls on a fairly wide range of sources, from evolutionary psychology through to contemporary science, through to various philosophers and so on. The problem for human beings is that we're born without an instruction manual. Now, all things are born without an instruction manual, but they seem to get by on instinct and whatever their genetics program them to do. The problem for human beings is that we have a mind that can manipulate concepts and symbols and images and things. And so we think about things. And so it's not quite as straightforward for us. However, having said that, we're born, we go through childhood, adolescence, and parents, teachers, peers, friends maybe, they all shape how we think and how we live. It's all foreign stuff, it's all coming from outside, and there's very little attention given to what it is that we actually are. And so typically we don't learn what we are. We just live kind of blindfold in the world with the programming that society heaps upon us. And this programming may fit with the way we are, but very often it doesn't. So we grow up full of neurosis and anxiety and depression and all kinds of conditions. Your average person lives like that. Most people wouldn't admit that, but that's the reality of it. No one's really interested in providing you with an instruction manual, even if they had one, because the main task of your programming is to get you fit in with life, to be a useful member of society. You might not want to be a useful member of society, but that's the way you'll be shaped. So, because we have no knowledge of what we are, what this thing we call life is, and why we behave the way we do and think the things we do, then we kind of run blind. It's like flying blind, really. And when you fly blind, you tend to crash into things, and that causes pain. So let me go through the basic components of human experience. There are 4 of them. They could be split into 5 actually, but I'll leave it at 4. The primary thing in all of us is desire. Schopenhauer called it the will to life, Nietzsche called it will to power, Spinoza called it the conatus. And there are contemporary philosophers, or at least postmodern philosophers, Derrida and what's his name? Can't remember his name actually. Anyway, a number of typically French philosophers, Deleuze, that's his name, who postulated that actually power is or this will, which you could see as power. Power is what the universe is. It's nothing else but power. And the way it manifests in us is this drive to survive, to be something for as long as we can. Now, Schopenhauer called it will to life, Nietzsche called it will to power. This will to life has no real regard for you. It's just a blind force. It's blind, unconscionable, unconscious force. We all have it, and there are many people who moan about life, but they all get up in the morning, possibly go to work, they'll certainly eat something, they'll all seek shelter. This drive is driving them on, and if they're short of any of those things, food or whatever, they'll do whatever they can to get it. It's the survival drive, and it's the prime thing that drives us. Most people won't see that. They'll think that their hobbies or their career or something is the prime thing in their life, or maybe their relationships, but it isn't. The prime thing in your life is your will to survive, your drive to survive. That's what's pushing you along at a very fundamental level. So once you admit that, then obviously things like sex and food become very important, because clearly you need food to continue living. And if people are deprived of food, it is said, I think it was Rousseau who said it, that people will put up with most things, but when there's no food on the table, then you have the seeds of a revolution. And so having food is, kind of a pretty primary thing. You can deprive people maybe of heating in their homes to some extent. You can deprive them of all kinds of things, but deprive them of food and you're asking for trouble. And sex, because the will to life is interested in producing more life. It doesn't care about you, it just wants you to produce more life. And so procreation and the sex drive, as I guess everybody knows, is pretty well tyrannical. You can't ignore it. And younger people particularly, between the ages of what, I don't know, 15, 16, 17, through to the ages of, well, it depends on what kind of person it is, but at least to the age of 50 or 60. It's the prime motivator in much of what they do. They want to look good. They want to sound good. They want to be successful to attract mates. I've been through this in previous podcasts, but food and sex. And Gurdjieff famously said if he was deprived of food and sex, he got vindictive. And this is how it is. If we're deprived of the things that our fundamental drive for survival and procreation wants, then we get irritated. I've called it the wolf. The wolf gets a bit nasty. And we want to dominate. Well, we want to dominate because dominating gives us more chance of survival. If we're dominated, then we are at the mercy of those that dominate us. We don't want that. We want to dominate. We want shelter. We want territory. We want to own stuff. It makes us feel like we're fitter for survival. So this thing of desire is our prime driver, and the Zen Buddhists would say that the prime cause of our suffering is our will to survive, or our will to exist. And I'll get onto the suffering aspect of it in a moment, because the will to life, this blind, unconscionable, unconscious force, is just pushing us along. It is not the least bit interested in whether you are happy or not. It doesn't matter to the will to life whether you're happy. All that matters is that you bang out some kids so that the next generation can do the same thing. I guess it's metaphysical to some extent, all of that, but it's interesting that the modern philosophers are, or some of them at least anyway, are starting to go back to that notion that the whole universe is basically just this power crazy machine, and we take on aspects of that and manifest it through our own drive to survive. You don't design your desires. Your desires are built in when you're born. There's not a lot you can do about them. You're stuck with them. And they will push you through life whether you want it or not. So, saying I wanted this to be 20 minutes or less, I'm already at 9 minutes. Let's go on to the emotions. So, desires, they're built in. Your emotions are basically a barometer that tell you how well or otherwise you are doing in the survival stakes. If something happens that enhances your survival prospects, you will be happy. You get some money you didn't expect. You get some new, fantastic, attractive partner. You get promotion at work. Maybe you have a delicious meal. Anything to do with food, sex, power, domination, all those kind of things that I've just been talking about will give you positive, or what are called positive emotions. Happiness, excitement, Love. Love is nothing else but a pleasure you get from something, or it's a feeling you get from something that gives you pleasure. You'd hardly love something that was giving you pain. So the emotions are this barometer. When you're doing well, you will have so-called positive emotions. When you're not doing well, you will have so-called negative emotions. Hatred, envy, fear. You'll deride things, maybe. Jealousy. The list is fairly long. And some of the emotions that are seen as positive are actually negative. Hope, for example, is a negative emotion. You only have hope when you're fearful of something. Anyway, I won't go into all of that. But the emotions are measuring how you are doing on the survival scale. So your emotions are anchored to your desires. So when you have a desire for something, you will have an ambition associated with it. And when you have ambitions, then you're setting yourself up for disappointments and possibly thrills. But the problem is that all of this is a roller coaster. So today you make an extra couple of $100 because of XYZ. And you're happy. And then tomorrow you lose your wallet and it had $400 in it. And you're not happy. So you're a slave to circumstances. When you make the $200, your survival prospects are increased. When you lose the $400, your survival prospects are diminished. Albeit very slightly, but nonetheless, you don't want that to happen. So, on that basis, we are just slaves to fortune. Something good happens, you're happy. Something bad happens, you're not happy. It's a roller coaster. And you should know, and if you have any maturity, you will know that for every up there's a down, and for every down there's an up. It's just this roller coaster that we go up and down, all the way through our life, depending on how we're faring in terms of our survival and our procreation. So you can see we're kind of blind survival machines that are pushed along by these primary drives: sex, food, shelter, domination, power. We're pushed along by those, and depending on how well we're doing, so we have corresponding emotions. By the way, the emotions are always in your body. They're not in your head. You may think things like, oh God, what am I going to do because I haven't got any money for food next week or something. Those thoughts are in your head, but the fear that you get from that is in your body. It's not in your head. Your head may think things. I'll get to your head in a moment. Your head is just a symbol processor. It has no emotions. The emotions are in your body. Just like they are with animals. We're no different to animals with respect to emotions. Animals have fear, they have envy, they have jealousy, they have pride, they have excitement, and so on. So remember, desires, the primary drivers, emotions, how we're faring in terms of satisfying those desires, and then we come to our mind. Our mind is just a processor of language, symbols, and images. That's what it does. Those symbols, language, and images are representations of stuff that we've come across through our senses. So we have an idea of a cat. So every time we see something that looks like a cat, we say, oh, cat. It's just a representation. It's just a symbol or a bit of language for a cat. Even in mathematics and sciences, all we're doing is pushing around symbols. That's all we're doing. I say all we're doing, some of it's very nice and beautiful, but nonetheless, that's what we're doing. Now, the thing about the mind, although we think it might have lofty ambitions, the reality is that most of the time it's just servicing the body. Because the body wants to survive. The desires and all the rest of it are in your body. They're not, some kind of programming in your head as such. They're in your body. Your body wants food, your body wants fluids, your body wants sex, your body wants shelter. It doesn't want to be cold or too hot. And the mind is a servant of the body in almost everybody. So, think about what you do. When you go to sleep at night, your mind turns off. But then when you wake up in the morning, it's loaded with the survival program. The survival program says, go get a shower, go get some food, go get some money, go get a mate, go, whatever it is. All those things that you do, go and fix a roof because it's leaking, go do all this stuff to make sure that your survival is as assured as it possibly can be. And that's what most of your thinking will be about. It's finding the optimal way to satisfy your need for various resources. Money, obviously, sex, food, shelter, all of those things. Mates to make you feel more included in some kind of herd thing, and so on. So that's what your mind is doing. It's processor of language, symbols and images, and it processes those things to work out the best way to get stuff. That's mainly what it's doing. The problem is that we tend to think that we are our thoughts. We've got this language and images and symbols sort of churning away in our mind all day, and we identify with that so closely that we think we are it. When in actual fact, all of those things are totally alien to you. When you're born, you don't have all that stuff in your head. It's not something that really belongs to you. It's something that you acquire. And our mind isn't any old mind. It's shaped in a certain way. I haven't got time to go through all that. But you can't think two things at the same time, for example. You always think in terms of cause and effect. You can't think outside of those terms. And your inner world is governed by time. One thought follows another thought, and so on. I've mentioned before that I'm covering all this stuff on the Patreon channel, but this is a very broad overview of the whole thing. So, remember, it's good to summarize these things. You're primarily driven by desire. Your desires, whether they're satisfied or not, will determine your emotional state. And your mind is largely concerned with getting the resources that are needed to make you happy. In other words, to get the resources that your body needs so that you exist well, so that you're not feeling anxious and all those kind of things, and that you continue to survive. That's what your mind is doing most of the time. And then we come to the so-called external world, the sensory experiences, which take place in time and space. Now, we believe that time and space are properties of the world. They're not. Even contemporary physics is coming to realize that. Time and space are representations that our mind has evolved into, or the representations that have been useful for us over time, to give us a representation of reality that is useful for us. So, time and space, the way we think, is a result of evolution. It is not some God-given thing. It's worked out that it works very well for us. Whether bats think in terms of time and space is anybody's guess. Whether they have any notions of time and space. Of course, somebody's going to say, well, of course they do. I can see a bat. It flies through space and they go from birth to death through time. But obviously you're going to say that because you see the world in terms of time and space. Whether the bat is experiencing time and space, you can't say. There's a wonderful quote here from Donald Hoffman, a great book called The Case Against Reality. And this calls upon very contemporary research in physics and psychology and neuroscience and so on. It's one of my favorite quotes from the book, The Case Against Reality. Our perceptions of space, time, and objects were shaped by natural selection, not to be veridical, in other words, true representations, not to reveal or reconstruct objective reality, but to let us live long enough to raise offspring. Perception is not about truth, it's about having kids. So your belief that there's a whole pile of stuff outside of your mind, that you move from birth to death, these are representations that your mind has found, or through evolution you have found, or we have found as a species, to be very useful in helping us survive. And as Hoffman says, they help us ultimately just to live long enough to have kids and raise them, and then typically, when you get to your 50s, 60s, your health starts to decline, and the point at which your health declines depends on genetics, how you live, and so on. But at some point, after you've gone through that precious period of 30-something years through to 50-something years, your health will start to decline, and you'll die. The whole thing seems futile and meaningless, but that's because we view it in terms of time, space, and objects, and so on and so forth. You should know that the whole concept of time and space is now deeply questioned in physics. And physics, for the past 200 or 300 years, has been based on time and space. There's a thing called non-locality that can occur between atomic particles, which shows that those particles know nothing of time and space. Change one and the other one flips immediately. It doesn't matter if it's the other end of the universe, it will flip immediately. It's like there's no time or space. They don't operate in time and space. That's another topic. So let's summarize all of this. I haven't done 20 minutes, so I'm getting worse at this actually, in terms of the length of these things. You are a manifestation of will, desire. You have no say in how this will manifests. You are just pushed along by it. And if it chews you up, then life is not the least bit interested in that. All life is interested in is that you procreate and live long enough to raise your kids, and then you can die. It doesn't really matter after that. Your emotions are a roller coaster, and they are a barometer for how well you are servicing this will that you didn't ask for, that pushes you along to do everything you do. And if you're successful at surviving, then you'll feel happy, and if you're not successful, you'll feel unhappy. It's as simple as that. So you're at the mercy of fortune. And thought, your brain, it's not really your brain, your mind is a symbol and image processor, and it really is serving most of the time your need to survive, your will. So the emotions, the thought, they go back to this will that's pushing you along. And then we have the senses, which have evolved to maximize your interaction with the environment. And so we see the world in terms of time and space, because that's served us very well and as individual objects. But that too is serving the will to life, the will to power, as Nietzsche might call it. So emotions, thoughts, and senses, they're all serving this will to life. That's all we do, unless we do something else. So, are we completely trapped in that? Is it a prison? Well, yes, it is a prison. You can't step outside of it, unfortunately. You can't step outside of the way your mind operates, or the way your senses work, or the way your emotions operate. People try to discipline their emotions, but, they're just idiots. You can't discipline your emotions. When you are presented with, say, someone or something you love very much dying, you are going to grieve. You can't help it. So disciplining the emotions is a stupid idea, and all that will happen is you will end up either insane or with mental breakdowns or something of that nature. So is there a way out? Well, in the strict sense of the meaning way out, the answer is kind of no. But there is a strange thing happens. And that is, the more you understand the nature of your desires, the nature of your emotions, the nature of the way your mind works, the nature of the way your senses work. So in other words, the more you understand the structure of the prison, the more you will experience a kind of freedom from it. And we don't need to try and imagine what might lie outside the prison. All that happens is you become, understanding and knowledge create freedom. So the more you understand your emotions, the more you will be free from them, in the sense of you'll understand, oh fuck, yeah, I'm feeling envious because that guy over there's just got that brand new Maserati and he's displaying his power. He's got more power than me. So I know what's going on. Because he's got more power than me, I feel diminished. And so I'm envious. I hate the bastard. And you can understand what's going on, and the understanding diminishes the impact of it. Same with your thought. I've got these obsessive thoughts about, whatever it is. Oh fuck, all it is images and symbol manipulation that's going on. So there are ways out, and there are exercises that can be done to help that process along. So that's the human condition. And most people are passive with regards to it. They never understand their emotions or their desires or the way their mind works or their sensory apparatus works. They're just passive. And nature's fine with that. It's happy about that. Because, they bang out a few kids and they've done what nature requires of them. Some people are more inquisitive than that. They might want to understand the nature of this kind of prison they live in. And that's painful, actually. But you got a choice. You either suffer, as Gurdjieff said, you either suffer consciously or you suffer unconsciously.